right, so the next part of the project here of the 68 SS396L Camino is going to be reinstalling the 12-bolt rear end that I just rebuilt, and I'm going to be redoing the suspension as we put it back together. So made an order from the parts house, and I got the energy suspension polyurethane bushings that will go into the rear axle. There's a couple in the rear axle, and then the four arms, one on each end, that'll go in there. So I got that. New set of shocks for the rear. I'm going to reuse the springs that are in it currently. And the reason for it is I haven't had this car running before or driving, and springs are easy to change. So if I put it in, I didn't want to buy a new set of springs and put it in there and have it sit too high or have it sit too low or anything like that. So I figure I'll put the stock springs back in there, and if I don't like the way that it looks or if it doesn't ride right, I'll change the springs. Not a big deal. So also I bought these isolators that go in between the spring up here on the top of the spring and the frame, so it kind of cuts down a little bit of the noise, and you won't have any clunking or banging as you go over bumps. So that's going to be this portion of this project, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Oh, a neat little trick I saw here on the internet as I was looking around. I always like to go into, other YouTube videos and stuff, even if it's something that I already know how to do, that I've done a bunch of times before. I still like to go into YouTube and see how other people are doing stuff and get little tips and ideas. I'm always up for learning something new. But this is a pretty neat trick. You take a drill with a good sized drill bit, this is a 5/16 bit, and you go right alongside the rubber here, the bushing, to pull it out. I already did one side. It works pretty neat. And you just kind of put it right there, and you let it walk itself around. Got to get it in. And out comes the bushing. It's only the second time I've done that, so it kind of butchered its way through there, but it worked. And then the next thing you do to get this thing out, the shell out, is just hammer it out. Just like that. So, seems nice and clean in there to me. I'm gonna get a little bit of grease. Not very much, just a thin layer to kind of get past the dryness of everything. A little bit around here. Like I said, not very much. Now these have a step in them, so when you drive it in, it'll stop at the right spot. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit that in. All right, so we got the old ones removed and new ones put in there. Fumbled around with them a little bit, but they're driven in. According to the instructions here, well, there's actually 3 different of these spacers that come with it, 3 different part numbers, and they go on the other side over here to take up the space when you put the control arm on. This one for this side had to be trimmed down a little bit, so I trimmed it down and it's in there. Next step would be to install the actual bushing itself. It comes with a little bit of silicone that you're supposed to use, really sticky. I don't know how much of it you need, and put that around the outside. I did these in a set of springs before, and I guess this here is to keep it in a set of leaf springs. I did this to a set of leaf springs. But I guess that's to keep it from making too much noise, squeaking and all that. So, get that in there. Give it a little tap in. And that's that. And we also have this piece here that goes in there. I'll put a little bit more on that. Oh, this stuff is sticky. And put that one in. That one to tap in as well. Alright, that side's done. I'll just do the same thing to the other side. Okay, so here's the control arms. They're still attached underneath the car. There's the upper and then the lower ones on both sides. Now you can see they're rubber mounted and they move around quite a bit. They're worn out, but when I put the polyurethane in there, they won't have so much deflection. I mean, you want a little bit, you don't want it solid, but that's a little bit excessive. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull these out and get them on the bench, and we'll work on them there. All right, I got the control arms out of the car, and I got the bushings, removed the bushings from them. I used the same method, the control arm or the bushing in there, and I ran the drill bit around and popped them out. Side note on that, if you're gonna use that method, don't use a brand new drill bit. I didn't use any, I had a bunch of old ones, so I was using my old ones, but I mean, if you put a sharp one in there, you're just gonna wreck it. And I broke like 3 drill bits doing it on the ones for the control arm. They were a little tougher than the ones in the axle, but they all came out, got them out. Then I pulled out I beat out the shells for them. This one here, I won. This one here, I almost lost, but I won. And then I said, well, how about if I just cut them with the hacksaw, and then peel them out? And well, I really won on those, because that was the easy way to do it. So first I had to do it the hard way, because that's how I do it. But anyways, now that that's done, I got one of the shells in, or one of the shells in here, and I fought with that one, and I thought, I'm gonna call BS on that method. I'm not gonna do it like that again, because that was a lot of work to get it in. And I don't have a press. I have a buddy that has a press, and I could run over there and go use his press if I want, but I don't have one, and I would like to just kind of figure out a different way to do it here, give it a shot, and worst case scenario, I'll run over and use his press. I don't have one yet because I haven't run across a good deal on one with the right timing, so whatever, work around it. So what I'm gonna do, I do have a lathe, however. So what I'm going to do, I have a piece here that I'll use as my backing, right there. I'll put my piece in there, and then what I'll be doing, and I'm gonna use, let's do this side. I cut a little spacer to put in there. That's just a piece of exhaust tubing. Hopefully it'll hold up. If not, I'll make something else. That'll go right there to keep the control arm from bending in. This will be my bottom plate. This will go in here. It's not sitting on there right, but this is just for example. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a chunk of this stock and I'm gonna cut it off on the bandsaw. I'm gonna stick it in the lathe and I'm gonna turn it down so that way it'll fit right into the end of this and then right over there. So that way, and I'll drill a hole in the center, run a bolt through the hole, kit, cat, and caboodle, tighten it all in and do it that way. So that's my plan. All right, I'll go ahead and hack 1.5 inch of this off. Just like that. All right, so I got everything here made up. This is gonna be the one piece that I turned on the lathe. And again, I'm not a lathe guy. I just got one. My dad and I had an idea one time. We thought, hey, let's go get a lathe. And we looked around and we found one and we bought that old lathe there. Either one of us, my dad and myself both, hadn't used a lathe since high school. So we got it and it sat over at his place for a long time, and then I ended up with it over here. And I screw around with it a little bit, but I'm no machinist. But I made this, and it fits in there pretty nice. Took a piece of old irrigation pipe, aluminum irrigation pipe, and I cut it down and then milled the end. So that'll go over here. Again, this will go in here. I have an old piece of exhaust tubing I set in the middle here to keep it as a spacer. And let's give it a whirl, you know, let's put it together and see what happens. Alrighty, let's see how this all goes. I got that backwards. We're gonna go that way. All right, now we got it the right way. Now we'll go through there, back into here. Throw a little bit of grease on there, and you know what, it'd probably be a pretty good idea to put a little bit of grease around the inside of this hole here, just to keep it from chewing up on the way in. Okay, let's see how this works out. I'll put a ratchet over here, and a wrench over here. Hopefully you can see okay right in here. Seems to be going in there just fine. Everything's holding up. How about that? Didn't even need a press. Came out pretty good. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and do the rest of these, and we'll go from there. Well, I got the rear end all done, bolted up, got the bushings into the control arms. That little tool I made actually worked out really well. I didn't even have to use a press, and you know, it's really good. You can save a couple bucks and work with scrap, and now I got another tool I can throw in my toolbox. Just add to the collection. And a little bit more experience, you know, that was something I mean, I've done stuff like that before, but now I have one specifically for that. But anyways, the rear end's all in, bolted up. I touched up the paint on the control arms. They were in really good shape, and there's no need to get into super details underneath this car. It's really clean to begin with. There's no rust. So any bare metal I'm painting, but other than that, I'm not going to detail underneath the car because I'm going to drive this. This is going to be you know, if I get out and I'm riding around out on a trip and it starts to rain, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to keep on, you know, doing what I'm doing. It's not going to be a fair weather car. But anyways, the rear end's all in and bolted up. The only thing left to do now is to tighten up all the bolts and put the shocks on, and I'll wait until after I get the car down on the tires and get the weight on it, and then I'll go ahead and tighten up all the bolts and then put the shocks on, and then that'll be a wrap on here, all done, you know, as far as the rear end goes. And I think next thing I'm going to do is the brake line front to rear. I'll replace that and do some of the lines up in the front that need to be replaced. So that'll be the next video. So thanks a lot for watching. I appreciate it. Please make sure to subscribe and like, and give me a comment if you'd like. Thanks.